This is the Portland Amateur Radio Club monthly presentation. And this month, our presentation is by Mike Ritz, W7VO, and he's going to give us an update, an ARRL update. And Mike is the ARRL Northwestern Division Director. Go ahead, Mike.
All right, well, thank you guys very much. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Do you need to stop sharing before I can share? Oh, there we go. Okay, share a screen. Oh, I need you to enable participant screen sharing. Oh, there we go. Everybody, I hope can see that. And I gotta move things around so I can see what I'm doing here. Okay, everybody see that? I need to figure out what to do to get everything off the side here. There we go.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. Anyway, for the new people that that are here that have just gotten their license or in the process of getting licensed, Gretchen, that's for you. I am the the Northwestern Division Director for a group called the American Radio Relay League, abbreviated the ARRL. And we are the National Association for Amateur Radio. If you want to go on and check out who we are, it's 157,000 members. Amateurs are members of that organization. I cover I was elected in 2018, and I covered the 5 Northwestern states, from Oregon up through Alaska. So, and it's been a pleasure to serve you guys for the last 3 years. So anyway, I'm going to give you guys an ARRL update, kind of say what these updates are going to be primarily related to the committees that I'm on. The 15 directors that represent the hams in the U.S. are broken up into divisions, and our division, I'm on the committees for the Program and Services Committee, which I'm the chair this year. I'm also on the Strategic Planning Committee. I'm on a committee for what's called the Clean Signal Initiative. And I'm also on the ARRL Foundation, which is their scholarship and arm and grant arm of the ARRL. So I keep pretty busy. So I'm talking about some of the things that what we're doing based on the fact that based on what I'm doing within them. So you know, it's kind of my best perspective. I don't know everything that the A&F committee, the Administration and Finance Committee, is doing, and some of the MCOM committee, what they're doing, but I can report on what we're doing on program and services. So our agenda this evening, I'll try to make this pretty quickly. We're going to talk about the field day rule waivers for 2021. Max talked about field day coming up here in June, and the ARRL has decided to make some special allowances for field day. For the new hams that are on here, or people that are wanting to become hams, field day is an event sponsored by the ARRL that people go out and basically they build a radio station in the field. And the Portland Amateur Radio Club has a great job that they do in that every year. Max, you guys going to be doing field day this year as a live event?
Yes, we last year we had it in my place in Oregon City. We have 5 acres out here, so we put up some tents and made sure everybody was safe and socially distanced. So we'll plan that for this year also. Good.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear. I know a lot of groups, we operated, normally we go up in the hills, but we did the same thing. We operated from my house, from my patio. So we had 2 stations set up on the patio at the opposite ends that kept the about 15 feet of distance. And we used, we threw up some antennas and had a good time. So there's ways to do field day even during pandemic. So we're going to talk about what some of the special waivers are that we're going to be doing for this year. We're talking about this thing that David Minster, our new ARRL CEO, calls Project Eagle. It's the new ARRL Strategic Plan Working Group that I'm going to be a part of, or something that I'm putting together. This is a pet project of mine called the ARRL Clean Signal Initiative. We're going to talk a little bit about what that is. It kind of tell by what its title is, exactly what it'll be covering. We're talking about what's going on with the ARRL Foundation Scholarship Program. Just a real quick blurb on that. An update on the ARRL. That's the Volunteer Monitor Program. I left the word monitor, but the Volunteer Monitor Program, which replaced the Official Observer Program. And I'll talk about a couple of FCC issues that are going to be taken care of, hopefully here pretty soon. and a little bit about the QSO today, Ham Expo. Max kind of already covered it, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail and maybe some things that you want to pay attention to if you guys do decide to do that. And then we'll have a little quick Q&A session if anybody has any questions at the end. So let's go ahead and get started. Field day rule waivers. Well, the bottom line is that 2021 field day is going to look a whole lot like 2020 with one big change. And what we did last year was we allowed normally Class D stations, which are home stations on commercial power, are not allowed to get point credit for working other Class D stations. The idea was to discourage home stations. Well, during the pandemic, we can't exactly discourage home stations because that's where everybody's going to be and there'd be nobody in the field. So last year, 2020, we made a special allowance to allow Class D stations to get point credit for operating to transmitting to other Class D stations. Well, what it turned into was a big contest between Class D stations, running Yagis and big antennas and basically dominating the event. I operated Class 2 Echo. We were on emergency power here, and I know in my laws, I'm sure it was the same with you guys, but I worked a whole lot of Class D stations. Probably 2/3 of the stations I worked were Class D stations. So the idea is to, and they basically dominated the event and made it, really not fun for some people. Like guys that were doing it, we had a great time, but as the director and through the ARRL, we heard a lot of complaints about that. As I mentioned here, largest complaint. So what we have is we have basically guys that are out there, tying a Yagi to a ladder and holding it up and hope it doesn't fall down, right? Or trying to make their own power out of a bicycle and a generator, competing with the guy with the tower with the stack of Yagis. This happens to be W2RE, the big remote station up in Maine, and guys that have their big contest, multi-operator contest stations going on. With their amplifiers with a pair of 8877s in them, that have a lot of power. So, how do we equalize that? Well, what we decided to do was to basically for 2021, we're going to have exactly the same rule change for 2020, except we're going to limit all Class D, which are the home stations on commercial power, and the Class E stations also, the home stations on emergency power, to low power only, which is 150 watts. And so technically there should not be any big stations out there running amplifiers. The guys that are out in the field can run amps. If you want a generator and you want to run 1500 watts for field day, feel free to do so. You'll be on equal footing with the guys with the big Yagis and the stacked antennas. So low power only. There was some discussion at the last Program and Services Committee meeting. People were saying, well, that's not enough. What we need to do is we need to figure out a way to penalize the Class D stations or give the Class A, B, and C stations and F stations more points. So you get 2 points if you're a Class B station, and you only give 1 point if you're working a Class D station. Well, that just was not going to work. And the reason is because it becomes a nightmare for the guys that write the logging software. They've got to go in there and figure out, how to give more points for certain stations, classes, and not points for other classes. And oh, by the way, you won't know until you work somebody what class they are. So you may be spending a lot of time working class, or may not find out somebody's a Class D station until you're ready to put them in the log. So we decided it was just not worth it. And the bottom line is, in 2022, if the COVID willing, will be reverting back to 2019 rules. And so there really is no change for the software developers for the logging programs. They're going to be able to use their 2019 rules when they go back, and they'll be able to use the 2020 rules for this year. Other than there's essentially no logging software change. So we try to keep things simple. There's a lot of people that are complaining that, we shouldn't have changed any of the rules in the first place. We should just, field days should have everybody in the field. If you're not in the field, you don't belong. Well, the idea here is that, because of COVID, because of the fact that the idea is to get a lot of participation in there. If you only have a few stations in the field that work each other, it's really not going to be fun either. The idea is to get as many people as we can on the air And the way to do that is to get everybody involved. So we tried to come up with a good compromise that was going to get everybody involved. That, for me, anything I do on the Program and Services Committee is what can we do to get more people active and get more people on the air. And any way we can do that, I'm behind 100%. Project Eagle. This is a term that our new CEO, David Minster, NA2AA, came up with. You guys will recall that in January 2020, a motion that I wrote was passed to establish a new working group and essentially draft a new ARRL strategic plan. Our current plan expired at the end of last year, and it wasn't really a plan. We're going to talk about that in a second. You guys that saw when I was running for office, I think I came to your club and gave you a presentation. I talked a little bit about strategic planning. We needed to put even though I wrote this motion and it passed unanimously and almost unanimously in January of 2020, we really needed to put the project on hold until we hired a new CEO, which happened here in January of this year. So we had to get a new guy. And why wait? And the answer is because when you write a strategic plan, the guy who has his feet held to the fire is the CEO. He's the one ultimately responsible for making sure the plan gets implemented and is going to be gauged. His performance is going to be gauged by how successful the plan is. So he has to have input into the strategic plan. We're also going to have members brought in from the outside, not just from the board, not just from the ARRL, but bring people in from the outside to be part of this working group. And the plan is to ensure this plan is really forward thinking, is to bring people from the outside, that everybody at the ARRL kind of works in a bubble. And even with the board of directors, it's a certain bubble of amateurs. And the idea is to bring in some people from the outside and help them draft the strategic plan for the ARRL. And by the way, the new plan will have metrics and periodic reviews. It'll be reviewed yearly, which the existing plan didn't have. As a matter of fact, if you take a look at, I don't know how you guys may or may not know about strategic planning. I come from the business world. This is how businesses are run. But basically, there are the different strategic plans consist of basically writing up goals, objectives, creating strategies, coming up with metrics to measure how successful you are, and then the end result is based on the fact you get all these things together. And of course, they're all wrapped around defining what your mission is. What the mission of the American Radio Relay League is. Well, the original strategic plan that the league accepted and brought in a draft form and approved finally in 2016 only really contained goals, objectives, and a mission. That was it. There was really nothing tactical in it at all. It was basically a wish list. Here's what our goals are, here's what we want to do, and here's what our mission is. But really, there was nothing there to describe how any of that was going to get done. So things really, really languished. The new plan will have not only the strategies, but the strategies and the tactical side of this. How are we going to do that? We're going to grow amateur radio. How are we going to grow amateur radio? We're going to grow ARRL membership. How are we going to grow membership? And oh, by the way, how are we going to know if we were successful or not? Because the bottom line is you got to get results, and the results will be, David Minster's performance as CEO will be based on what the results are. So that's why he's really a key guy to have this ARRL strategic plan written. The Clean Signal Initiative. This is something that I'm a contester. A few of you guys know that, but my main interest in amateur radio is contest, and I was on for about half of the 48 hours of the ARRL DX phone contest last weekend, and I made about 430 or 440 contacts. It was brutal. Conditions were brutal, but anyway, during one of the previous contests, it was a CW contest. I heard a lot of people after that contest complain about key clicks and how lousy the CW was, the Morse code, and with these things that are called key clicks, where you tune somebody in and you hear all this noise that's on either side of where the actual noise is. And so I noticed that the ARRL rules didn't really discuss signal cleanliness, other than the fact that you had to abide by the rules of your nation, wherever you live, whatever your radio rules are, that's what you have to abide by in the contest. And there was no adjudication in there. There was nothing to disqualify somebody for having a bad signal or purposely interfering. So I decided, maybe we need to rewrite the rules. Well, the contesting guys got a hold of that and tore me a new one. They didn't want to have any more rules. So I decided to take this to a different angle. If you guys know Ward Silver, N0AX, he's one of the ARRL authors. He's the author of he's the main author of the ARRL handbook. And he and I got together, and he said, you know what, you're trying to approach this from a rule standpoint. What we really need to do is clean up the transmitters themselves and educate amateurs on how to set up their transmitters so that they don't get key clicks, and they don't splatter, and they don't cause interference to other people on the bands. And I thought that was a great idea. So I talked to David Minster, our CEO, and we're going to move forward now through the Program of Services Committee with this Clean Signal Initiative. So what is the Clean Signal Initiative? It's the establishment of a new working committee that came out of the Program of Services Committee. And I was really fortunate in the fact that I'm the chair of the committee this year. So I get to handpick the members that are going to be on this committee. It does a couple of things. It helps clean up interference problems, especially on contest weekends. You guys that are not contesters, we'll turn on 20 meters on a Saturday, and there's nothing but wall-to-wall signals, and oh damn, it's a contest weekend. I can't check into my net. I can't talk to my buddy, that I talk to every Sunday morning at 9 o'clock on 80 meters. This is horrible. Well, it'd be better maybe if some of the signals weren't quite so wide, with splatter and overmodulation and key clicks and all the other things. So the idea is to try to try to come up with an initiative to clean up the bands. Receivers, you guys, you can get amateur radio receivers now. The technology for receivers are about as good as they can get. Some of the modern ones, the FT101, some of the new ICOM radios, they've got fantastic receivers in them. And now we've got the receivers as good as we can get them. It's time to go after the transmitters. So this also puts the ARRL in the technical standards business. You guys are, I'm sure, all familiar with UL regulations. Oops, we got somebody that's got their mic on. Max, can you squelch them?
Yeah, Mike, you may have to unmute yourself.
There we go. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, so what it does is think of the UL, where the UL sets standards for safety. We're talking about kind of the ARRL setting technical standards for transmitters, affecting things like CW rise time. The largest number one cause of key clicks, besides the use of VMOS transistors and amplifiers, is the fast rise time and fall times of the signals. And a lot of the defaults on, for example, the ICOM radios, they're defaulted. That's adjustable in software, but the default is much faster than it needs to be, and it can cause key clicks. So the idea is to get the transmitter manufacturers to set default standards that will ensure or make it harder for a guy to screw his radio up and cause it to put out a poor signal. And the idea is, what I'd love to see is to have transmitters be ARRL certified to meet technical purity standards. And then, of course, following up with this thing as part of the ARRL lifelong learning program that kind of yet still has to get off the ground, but it's ham operator education. It's working with the manufacturers to come up with maybe videos to show people how to properly turn set the ALC, how to properly set the compression that they use on single sideband, how to set for key clicks, right, and basically how to set up their transmitters so that they don't cause a problem. Ham radio operators, no offense against people that have recently been licensed, but the makeup of ham radio operators is a lot different than it was 50 years ago when I first got in. When I first got into amateur radio, it was primarily a technical hobby, and it was technical people getting into the hobby. And now it's the people that are interested in MCOM, they're librarians. They're you know, there are a lot of people that are not necessarily technically minded, and I think we need to adjust the education program a little bit to kind of help them along. So we'll see where this goes. We have yet to finish putting the committee together. I have two excellent engineers that are on my program and services committee that are going to be part of this. I hope to bring Ward Silver in. I hope to maybe bring in Rob Sherwood. You guys that are maybe familiar with Rob Sherwood and the receiver, the work that he's done in receiver testing, to get him involved in it. But we'll see where this goes. It's right now, it's just at the cusp of getting started. And you can see up on the upper right corner there, so far we have a logo. And that's about all we've done, other than just some thinking. So at least we have a logo. The ARRL Foundation, this is a separate corporation that is part of the ARRL, but it's a separate 503c, and it's our scholarship and grant arm. This year, we are just in the process of starting to work on the scholarships. We've had 175 applicants for over 100 scholarships. Last year, it's up from last year. Last year, we had about 135 applicants and 92 scholarships. So the workforce has gotten larger this year. The top dollar scholarships are also up due to generous donation. The Amateur Radio Digital Communications Group has donated, I believe it's $200,000 to our scholarship program for this year. And so we have a couple of, in prior years, the largest scholarship has been $5,000. This year, the two largest scholarships are going to be $25,000 each. And then it's going to be, I think there's 13 $10,000 scholarships, and then additional $5,000 scholarships, plus all the ones that we normally have. So it's going to be a lot of high dollar scholarships this year. And we're just getting started on that. They have just made the assignments. I think I've got 13. I've done all of our, we got the vetting done for the larger value scholarships. We're going to have phone interview with the final candidates for those. For the 10,000 and the 5,000, or the $10,000 and $25,000 scholarships. And then we have the smaller ones we work on individually. We're assigned scholarships, and we basically start with a spreadsheet that's, if you put it on a wall, it'd be about 6 feet by 8 feet, which are all the requirements for each for each scholarship and each student, and we have to find the best one out of there. So it's a lot of data sorting to come up with the cream that rises to the top for a particular scholarship. And each one takes me about 4 hours to do each scholarship. By the time I sort, vet, research, you know, I research every candidate on QRZ to see if they've got a QRZ profile. I look at how active they are in amateur radio. So, I mean, there's a lot of vetting that occurs for these scholarships. And the plan is to have all the scholarships done and be done by the end of May, because this would be for the 2021-2022 school year. So we hope to have all the scholarship vetting and the applicants be able to be notified sometime in May. The ARRL Volunteer Monitor Program. This replaced our, this is an initiative, the FCC, well, let's put it this way. The FCC decided to try to save some money. They closed all their FCC field offices that they're using to monitor the radio waves. And they said, hey, you guys are amateurs. You guys are self-sufficient. Why don't you start doing our work for us? So the Volunteer Monitor Program was set up as an alliance between the ARRL and the FCC. Basically, it was just to kind of, you know, have the ham, listen to the ham bands, and if somebody's doing something right, they get a little note in the mail. If they do something wrong, they get a little note in the mail. There's no really enforcement activity. This is primarily informational for people, and it replaced the ARRL Official Observer Program. It's a little bit more formal. These people all have training through the FCC. A lot of them have SDR radios where they can actually physically look at the width of signals and identify how close somebody is to a band edge. They're not really the police, but they're there to basically to educate. So we finally got a report out of our first year of activity. So in January 2021, Riley Hollinsworth, K4ZDH, submitted his report. He's the prior FCC engineer who is the ham ARRL head of this program. They reported cumulatively 2,277 hours of monitoring on the HF bands and 2,162 hours monitoring VHF frequencies and above. I'm sure a lot of these were done also. I know one here in Oregon uses an SDR to listen. The volunteer monitor coordinator, so out of all those hours, they only issued 11 advisory notices. And just to kind of, give you guys a clue about what they're looking for. And by the way, the advisory notice is not really, you can't think of it like a speeding ticket, but it's an attempt to resolve rule violations. And they really only go after ones that are agrarious, ones that are, more than just a little simple problem. And this is done informally. You get a little note in the mail that says, hey, we noticed that you were doing this, please stop it. And this occurs long before there's any FCC intervention. If the FCC comes knocking on your door, you don't believe me, you don't want to have that happen. So what happened? What kind of things were they talking about? Well, operators in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Centralia, Washington, right here in our division, Edmond, Oklahoma, Fontana, California, and Orleans, Massachusetts received advisories concerning operation outside their license class. And my guess is that these were people that either had technician class licenses, that bought a new radio, HF radio, and got on the air, and they were not licensed to be there, or they could be people that were operating in the general, that were general class licensees, and they were down in the extra portion of the bands. So watch those band edges. And if you've got an HF radio and a technician class license, wait till the technician enhancement program is in, then get on the air. An operator in Thornhill, Tennessee received a advisory concerning interference, and this must have been deliberate interference. So received an advisory related to that. Another one in Tennessee received an advisory regarding excessive bandwidth. So he must have had a signal that had a lot of splatter in, probably overmodulating, and an extra wide signal. Operators in Miami, Florida, Friendly, West Virginia. What a place to live, Friendly, West Virginia. Collinsville, Illinois, and Kingsburg, New Jersey received advisories concerning station ID issues. They weren't following the 10-minute rule, so they were probably getting on and rag chewing and spending a lot longer than 10 minutes to identify. And this is an interesting one. An operator in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania received an advisory regarding improper use of a linear amplifier. Now, I wonder what that means. And my guess is it probably was not a legal linear amplifier. Maybe it was one that had a little bit more than 1,500 watts output. But I wonder how that came to be, because he must have been doing something that was bad enough that they would have to go check and identify that he was using his amplifier improperly. I'm not quite. I have to ask Riley what that one was about, because that one interests me. So some questions that come up to me that I get asked all the time. And number one question is, when will they start incorporating this new $35 application fee? If you guys are familiar, if you read my bulletin that come out, under the Trump administration, they had this thing in 2018 called the Raise Bomb Act, and it asked the FCC to have their fee schedule based on what it costs them to do transactions, so that they're not necessarily a profit center, but they could be at least break more even than they did. And the original fee for amateur radio application, which right now is free, right? You get a ham radio license, you renew, you get vanity call, everything's free. And the reason is because it was costing them more to process the paperwork than they were getting in fees. So they decided to go ahead and drop that. So originally they had come out with $50. The ARRL and many amateurs vigorously opposed that, and they dropped it to $35. And the question is, well, when are they going to start doing it? And the answer is sometime this summer. There's a problem in trying to figure out how they're going to handle people paying fees. The FCC does not use PayPal, right? They got to have some way to set up online where people can do this online. They're doing away with paper, right? They want everybody to process their applications via email. They don't want to see paper anymore. They're becoming completely paper free, and so they've got to figure out how to get this done. And the other question is, what happens to VEs that are out there doing their volunteer examining? How are they going to collect the fees, and how are they going to get the money to the FCC? And all that has to still be worked out. I don't have answers for any of that. It may be a thing where you apply when you get your FRN set up, if you're going to be a new licensee, and you may have to you may have to set up and pay on the website and then take your license, or you take your license and before they process it, they'll send you a note that says, hey, you passed, we'll get you a license, but here, you got to send us $35 first. So they've got to work all that out. The second big question is, you guys have heard me talk a lot. I think I gave a presentation to you guys on band planning at one time. When will the technicians get their phone privileges on the HF bands? I've had a lot of discussions and a lot of questions to David Siddall, our FCC counsel for the ARRL on this. And the answer he gave me is they're going to be combining this RM, which is RM 11828. It's a proposal for rulemaking. We're going to be combined with several other RMs that have been hanging out there. Some of them have been out there for 6 or 7 years now. So they think that this is a good time to get these things through, because it's kind of a slow time. The 5G stuff that the FCC has been working on the cellular side is getting more and more, getting closer to fruition. 5G is being rolled out by a lot of the networks now, and that's really been taking a lot of their time. And amateur stuff is kind of, since we weren't paying anything, we kind of got stuck to the bottom of the pile. But David Siddall's doing a great job with working with them and trying to get some of this stuff resolved. And we hope that the technician enhancement proposal that the FCC put out, that will give technicians HF phone privileges on a lot of the ham bands, except for 20 meters, will be acted on this spring. So we'll see where that goes. The QSO today, Virtual Ham Expo, and Max kind of talked about this at the very beginning, Max, so thank you for putting that on there. It starts March 12th, which is Friday, 6 p.m., and it's on for 48 hours, and it's available on demand until April 12th, 2021. The entry fee, I believe, is $10, but I think if you do it at the door, as Max said, it's $12. The guy that does this, Eric Gunth, out of Israel, puts this thing together. And he did the last one kind of as an exploration to see how popular it would be. And he ended up with over 16,000 registrants. And he finances this thing completely out of his pocket. So I'm sure this thing must cost him a lot to put on. So this year he's asking for a $10 entry fee if you sign up in advance. And I believe it's $12 at the door. And I participated a little bit last year. And it was really, it's essentially like attending the Ham Fest. There are virtual booths for manufacturers. The ARRL will have a booth there. We're a major sponsor of the event. You get a chance to actually talk to David Minster, NA2AA, our new ARRL CEO, will be there. Bob Enderbitson, who's our Director of Product Development, will be manning the booth, our virtual booth, and you'll actually be able to interact with some of the people at headquarters. You've got complaints about QST or comments, or you want to complain about what a lousy job I'm doing, there's some guys that will be glad to listen to you. By the way, our new CEO, David Minster, NA2AA, will be the keynote speaker. He's going to be on the air for an hour starting at 12 noon on Saturday. And if you want to know about him, he's really a great guy. He's a much better person to represent the ARRL than Howard Mickle, our prior CEO that was hired by the prior board. I've been very happy with David. He's been very receptive of the board and really is working with the board rather than trying to think of the board as an enemy. And I'm really happy to have him on board. And he will be the keynote speaker. And he tells me he's going to have an evangelical speech. So he's going to be there to promote amateur radio. And I highly recommend that you and tell you some of the things and initiatives that they've got going on at League headquarters. They do have about 80 speakers. So if there's something you want to know about amateur radio, there's going to be somebody there talking about it. I think there's about 5 or 6 per session, and there's hour-long sessions. Each session this year, this time around, will be pre-recorded. So people have had to go I went into Zoom for mine. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But most of the presentations that are not live demonstrations you're going to be watching a pre-recorded session that are done, a pre-recorded video, and then a Q&A session following that. And I'm not sure how it's going to work, but we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, so I think they did that primarily to make sure that everybody stays on time. Because a lot of time, you get doing one of these programs and what you think is going to be a 30-minute program winds up being an hour. So they've got all these sessions this time will be pre-recorded. And I believe for the hour long, they're an hour segments, but the program itself is they wanted between 20 and 25 minutes. Mine came out to 21 minutes. So I think they do that to try to keep the timing going. And oh, by the way, did I mention your Northwestern Division Director, yours truly, will be on at 1 o'clock right after David's keynote speaker with my session called "The Storied History of the Ham Radio Call Sign." And for you new amateurs, it's really kind of interesting. It's a history lesson. It's kind of a history of radio, early amateur radio, and a history following the call signs, and where we started with and where we ended up with. And if you want to know why our call signs look the way they do, and what they did before they even had call signs back in the early 1900s, and what world event caused there to be a need for call signs. There's a major world event that occurred that actually had the U.S. decide that maybe we needed to get amateurs with call signs. So we're going to talk about a little bit about that. So I want to encourage everybody at the Northwest here to watch my program. If you have more information or questions about the QSO Today Hamfest, you can look it up at qsotodayhamexpo.com, or just go in Google and just put in QSO Today Ham Expo, and you'll be directed to the website. So that's all I've got here. So are there any questions from anybody? I will entertain any questions. Or is everybody still awake? You know, is everybody still there?
Hello,
Yes.
sir. How are you doing?
Yes, Patrick. Pratik.
It's Pratik. Thanks for the presentation. And I wanted to ask, I'm an international student in Portland, how can I avail the scholarships that you mentioned during your talk, and the other resources that you mentioned? How can I avail those, because I wish to learn and grow? And how can I do that? Any recommendations would be appreciated.
So your question is related to the ARRL scholarship program?
Yes, sir.
And what you can do is you can go on at the ARRL website and go and look up the ARRL Foundation. They've got all the terms of references for all the scholarships are listed on there. There's scholarships ranging from $25,000 down to $500. Wow. And there are some that are reserved for amateurs residing in the Pacific Northwest. So, some of the terms of reference were put together. These are most of the ones we have were put in people, they were bequests, where they donated a certain amount of their estate to the ARRL to put into their scholarship program. So a lot of these are memorial scholarships, and you can go on there and there's a whole list of scholarships. Just do a Google search for ARRL Foundation and look at all the different terms of reference for them. I believe in September or October, I believe September or October is when we put out the request for student applicants to submit their applications. And then we start in March, we start vetting those, and then the awards are done in probably, it would be announced probably in May or June. So I hope that answers your question. Any more questions?
Oh, yes, sir. Thanks for that. So I believe then, am I late for it? Because since you said that it's been posted in the month of September and October, and by this time you actually
for this year, you're correct. For this academic year coming up, you would have to apply for the 2022-2023 scholarships for next year, next year. So
okay.
These scholarships we're working on now, I believe it was sometime in December is when it closed. And then in January, we actually start putting together the scholarship program and trying to get all the to get everybody to get all the information in, and then start the vetting process. And we're a little bit late this year getting started with that, because a lot of the scholarships were still kind of we have to ensure that there's enough funding for all the scholarships. And some of the scholarships have been around for 15 or 20 years. They're starting to get dried up. We have to go back and contact the sponsors of these to try to see if they can, if they want to refund the scholarship. There's a lot of work that goes into this program, and I encourage you to apply for next year and try to see if you can win one of the scholarships. As an aside, the best thing you can do is to be an active ham. I know the one thing that I'm vetting, when I'm vetting candidates, one of the things that I do, I've been an active ham now for pretty close to 50 years. I started just out of high school, and I've been active. It was what I grew up doing, and I still do it now as a guy pushing 70 years old. So I would say, get between now and the time you apply, go on QR, get your license. Are you licensed now?
Not yet, sir.
Okay, number one, get licensed, right? Number one, get licensed. Number two, once you get licensed, get on the air, right? Get active in this club, get Elmered, get people to help you out. And these are scholarships that are sponsored by a radio organization. And the best way you can get a scholarship for a radio organization is to be a radio guy, right? Okay. So I highly recommend you do that.
Definitely, sir. I'll look forward to getting licensed soon.
Good. Yeah, great. And if you do, make sure you join the ARRL. It doesn't hurt either. Anyway, any more questions?
Mike, I'm losing my voice here, but back to the key clicks, in particular, being a CW guy, is it more a matter of technical sense in the fact that the manufacturers aren't producing clean rigs, or is it more a matter of adjustment? And
it's a combination of both.
Oh, okay.
The one thing about tubes is tubes are slow to have slow rise times and slow fall times, right?
Right.
You get cathodic emission between the cathode and the plate, and it doesn't stop instantaneously. Right. And as you know, a square wave has how many harmonics? Right. Infinite harmonics in a perfect square wave. So it has to do with the fast rise time and fall times of the transmitters, and it's exacerbated by the solid state VMOS amplifiers. And guys that are running, it's a combination of the fast rise times, and also it's what doesn't help matter are guys that are running full QSK at 40 words a minute. Right. And that really makes things bad, because in order to be able to hear in between each dit and dah, you got to have fast rise and fall times. And what that does is that dirties the signal up.
Sure.
So it's going to be a combination of both. And I know ICOM is one manufacturer that has default settings where the rise time and fall time of the CW signals are like 2 or 3 milliseconds. On Yaesu rigs, it's 6 milliseconds. A lot of these software, the software setups for these radios that rise and fall time are adjustable. And so it's an education process to identify that, to let the hams know that they got to go in and fix that. And number two, it's to get the manufacturers to have the correct default values in there, so you don't need to go into your radio and try to adjust them.
Got it.
So you can really thank solid state. And I was on for the CW contest for the ARRL. Right. And there were some bad signals out there. I mean, some of the Russian signals that I heard, well, actually there was guys from Italy. Several of the Italian stations had such poor signals, it sounded like they had 50 hertz hum embedded in their signals. And it takes me back to the old days in the 1980s with the Russians. They were using modified gear from the Russian military. And the guy who was the head of the IARU Region 1 contacted the ARRL and said, hey, you guys got to do something about this, because a lot of the European stations had extremely dirty signals. And so he came to David Minster from the IARU and said, hey, your clean signal initiative you guys are working on is where we need to go with this. So it just fell in perfectly. And Dan, you're a CW guy,
Sure.
What a bad signal sounds like.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm sort of stuck at QRP, so at least personally, it's not too much of an issue for me, but I sure heard a lot.
Yeah, it's education, number one, and number two. It's the fact that solid state devices are so much faster than tube stuff was as far as the
Right.
transition. So
Yeah.
it's an education for the manufacturers as well as the operators. So we're
Right.
gonna approach it from both directions.
Cool. Yeah,
Okay,
I
thank
know.
you.
Yeah, the Elecraft folks have been discussing this on their
Yeah,
mailing list.
Elecraft are one of the people
Yeah.
that are doing well. The U.S. manufacturers, it's primarily the Japanese manufacturers, and I don't know anything about the Chinese stuff. Chinese have some of their HF rigs now. So anyway, we'll see where this goes. It's I say this whole program's at the infant stage. I'm doing it. I'm really the guy that's pushing this through the ARRL, and I'm not getting a lot of pushback, but also at the same time they got a pretty full plate on a bunch of other things. So
Right.
I'm trying to make this kind of my key legislation while I'm a director with the ARRL.
Great.
Okay, any more questions?
Yeah, one more, please. So you mentioned about the bad signal. What do you mean by bad signal? I mean, was it having some, what kind of issues were you experiencing when you're defining something as bad signal?
Well, just imagine if you had, for example, on a phone signal, imagine if you were if you turned the speaker volume up so loud that it became incomprehensible. You're overdriving the speaker, right? And what happens is a lot of times people over modulate the transmitter, and the signal becomes excessively wide. So instead of a signal being this wide in the bandwidth, it'll be this wide. And what happens is all this extra space that's being used out here, nobody else can use that because the guy that's splattering all over the place is doing it. And key clicks are extra little spurious signals that come out of a transmitter. When you listen to CW, it should sound like a pure tone. And once you turn away from that pure tone, it should be gone. What happens is with key clicks is you'll turn away and you'll continue to hear it as a clicking sound in addition to the tone. So it's basically a distorted signal. Instead of being a nice clean signal, it's got all these little spurs that are on the side of it. If you look at it with I don't know how technical you are, but if you look at it on a spectrum analyzer, you'd see all these little spurs on the side of the main signal. And the idea is to get rid of the spurs that are on the side. I hope that made sense to you.
A good way to think of it is stay in your lane when you're driving. You
Right.
know, if it's a 4-lane road and you're taking up 2 lanes, you're clogging up the system.
Right, and I kind of think of it as a guy that's rolling a ball down a lane at a bowling alley. You don't want your ball to wind up in the next lane over. Right.
That's great. Yeah.
The idea is to keep the ball in your own lane.
Right. Right.
Okay. So anyway, thank you for that question. Any more questions? And for that, I'll turn it back over to Jeanette. Thank you, Max. I appreciate you guys allowing me to come here and talk to you tonight.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. One question I did have with the home stations, was there a lot of pushback with limiting them to 150 watts?
Absolutely not. I haven't heard anybody complain about that at all. The complaints I heard is, why are you letting them be on the air in the first place? Right. That's really the main complaint that's left. And the big complaint from last year, the #1 complaint, and David and I talked about this, and I get a lot of email too, was the fact that it basically turned into a contest. And everybody knows that field day is not a contest, right? It's an operating event. And for you new hams that are out there, and guys that want to get licensed and are thinking about getting licensed like Gretchen, when the Portland club does their field day, get involved in it and go out and be part of it. And you get a really good feel about what amateur radio is. And this is really a wonderful club. The fact that you guys got 41 people on a Zoom call, I think this is the largest. I do a lot of these presentations for clubs since we went virtual. And this is one of the largest ones I think I've done this year. So congratulations to you guys for having a wonderful club, and for what you guys are doing for the amateurs in Portland.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Mike, for all the updates. We're definitely going to have you back every so often.
we go. Anytime.
No, actually, we check the repeater, see if there's
Yeah,
any
absolutely.
questions. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you are listening, you're listening to the Portland Amateur Radio Club March meeting, and our guest tonight is Mike Ritz, W7VO, and he is the Northwestern ARRL Northwestern District Director. And if you have any questions on what you just heard, or if you have any questions for Mike in general, just give your call sign through the repeater and we'll be able to answer your question.
One more, please, if I can.
Oh, go ahead, Pratik.
Okay, thanks. I wanted to know, first thing is, during the talk, Mr. Mike also mentioned about the SDR, software-defined radios, I believe, if I'm not wrong, because how can we have hands-on training? I mean, if I were to do that, what would be a good resource, and any books that he would like to recommend, or any of you guys, since you guys are all great people, so anyone would like to point me out in the direction, that would be really appreciated.
Well, what the context I was using for software defined, and by the way, just about any new HF rig you buy now are going to be software defined radios. The ICOM radios, the new ones from Yaesu, they're almost all software defined. But the context that I was talking about that had to do with monitoring signal qualities on the bands. And what SDRs enable you to do is, because essentially it's a radio. The radio innards are contained within a computer, right? There's no physical mixers and all the stuff you would have in a conventional radio, preamplifiers and everything. It's all done within software. Well, they have the ability to spit that out into a spectrum display, where you get basically a display of frequency versus amplitude of any signal. And so the guys that are doing the volunteer monitoring is they're able to take a look at the bandwidth of the signals like a spectrum analyzer. And so they're using these software defined radios to not only hear the signal, but to see the signal and physically see what it looks like. I know it's kind of, if you're not familiar with it, it's kind of hard, but SDRs give you the ability to physically look at a signal like a spectrum analyzer would be if you were in a lab. The best thing I can tell you is that you got a lot of guys in this club that know a lot about SDRs, know a lot about radio, and just start asking questions. Go online and look up software defined radio in Google, and go on YouTube and look up software defined radio, and you'll get a lot of activity. I use an SDR here in my shack. I've got a lot of people in the club know I've got a fairly large radio station compared to a lot of amateurs. I've got 3 rooms in my shop are devoted to radio. Right. So I've got lots of radios, and I run a multi-op contest station. So I've got multiple antenna towers with lots of antennas. I've got 9 different HF antennas here to choose from. So, I use an SDR, a software defined radio, as a pan adapter to be able to, when you're tuning a radio, you're listening to one station at a time. Well, with a pan adapter and an SDR, I can look at the whole band and tell where each signal is in the band at the same time, and then tune to the one I want to tune to, right? So, I mean, it really is a tool that you have available if you're doing like I am in contest, and you want to know if there's going to be, are there enough signals on the band for me to change to that band? Well, here, let's take a look at what the pan adapter shows. Oh, look, there's 50 people on the air right now on that band. It's time to go on that band and operate. So I know this may, it's the main thing I have for you is ask questions.
All
right.
right.
And as a new guy, you're asking a lot of good questions. So that's a good sign.
Hey, Mike, is there a book, from the ARRL that sort of focuses on that? Do you know off the top of your head?
I don't know if there's one on SDRs, but if I would say go on the ARRL website and look. I believe they have an SDR. And oh, by the way, Rhea Jairam, N2RJ, who is the division director for the Hudson division over on the East Coast, she's doing a QSO today, Hamfest Expo, on SDRs, integrating SDRs into your ham shack. So I believe hers is on Sunday. So If you're going to do the QSO Today Expo, and by the way, all you new people, I'd recommend you pay the $10 and go and listen to some of these presentations. Find the ones that are aimed towards general and beginner. You learn about propagation. You're going to be learning about call signs. You're going to be learning about SDRs. You're going to be learning about operating stuff, and propagation is a big part of amateur radio. And Carl Leishwab, K9LA, who's a vice director in the Midwest, he's going to be doing a presentation just on propagation and what we expect in this new cycle 25 for propagation. So I'd highly recommend you guys take a look at joining that QSO event, especially if you're a new ham. And don't be overwhelmed. Take notes, and once you're done, ask questions.
Let's see. I wanted to get Nick KI7PTT up here if he's still here. If you're hearing me, Nick, what is the SDR site that we've used to listen to down in the Half Moon Bay? I don't know if he's still there. Is Nick still with us? Perhaps not.
No, he's not.
Oh, okay. Do you happen to remember what it is, Max?
I don't. I'll look it up at the end of the meeting.
I think it's
Yeah.
yeah. In other words, what this is, Pratik, is you can go online, and there are various stations throughout the country, throughout the world, that have SDRs at that location, and you can log online and as though you were listening, at that location. And often they have very large antennas, very or good locations, so that you can hear signals that you might not hear in your own locality, or if you don't have at this time a radio receiver. It's a very nice way to be able to just go online and actually start listening to some of the ham transmissions from all the various locations. And that's kind of a fun way to kind of maybe jumpstart your interest in that. And in fact, Mike might get a kick out of this. Just as an experiment a while back, I actually had a QSO where I was actually hearing the station on the SDR, but transmitting from my fixed location, just to see if we could pull that off just for fun. Because my noise level was so high, I couldn't hear the station at my home station, but I could hear him on the SDR. But he could hear my transmitted signal. So
Okay.
that was kind of fun. Kind of like a goofy way to do it, but
Okay, so I have a question now. Is it possible that I try that on my laptop or my phone currently, because I do not have a radio with me here, and I was wondering to experiment few things. So is it possible that can I hear? I mean, I don't think so I would be able to see, but unless I believe I can make my through my laptop, can I see or through, I mean, I need to see how can I enable the oscilloscope kind of thing here. I mean, oscilloscope, sorry, the
Yes.
jargons are bad. So how can I do that on my laptop? I mean, I believe my laptop would be the equal device to, because we do get the Wi-Fi and all of that. So it has a receiver, definitely, for sure. So can I experiment something related that we were discussing tonight or through my laptop? Because that makes sense, I believe. I could be definitely wrong on what I'm expecting. And
right. What you can do is if you can go into chat, we put a link in there. And
okay.
that chat will take you to a website where you can go and listen. You won't be able to transmit through that site. And plus, if you don't have a license, there wouldn't be allowed anyway. But you can certainly go ahead and explore and listen. And the link in there should help you.
Okay.
And too, I see who's let's see here. Stevie Ray. Where's Stevie Ray?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay, there you are. No, you mentioned about Rhea, right? Rhea's Shack and Rhea's awesome. Find her on YouTube. Yeah, Rhea is a director for the Hudson Division, and she is an amazing woman. This is National Women's Day, and so I'll give a little plug for her. But she is a single mom of 3, and an ARRL director of the Hudson Division. She also has her own YouTube channel and puts this thing out called Rhea's Shack. I think she puts out a video a week, and really nicely done, and a lot of basic amateur. I don't know how she does it. She's also a director, as I am, for the ARRL Foundation. I'm retired, right? So I got time to do this stuff. She works full time as a vice president for a bank, in their IT department. Runs their IT department. So she has a full-time job, full-time mother, you know, director for the ARRL, director for the ARRL Foundation, and she has her YouTube stuff. I don't know how anybody could do that, and yet she manages. So you're right. She is an awesome person, and I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, that's good to
awesome.
know.
Thank you,
And first
Steve.
of all the sorry. I would like to wish all the women here happy Women's Day. Thanks for being so great.
Awesome. Any other questions for Mike? Very good. And if you're listening on the repeater, this is the Portland Amateur Radio Club monthly meeting. And at this time, thank you very much, Mike. We'll definitely have you back very soon. And at this time, if I can find the window, Pete can talk a little bit about the Treasurer's Report, which is essentially the budget for 2021. And just so everybody knows, we kind of meet as a board about every other month, and we make sure that we have enough money for all the fun stuff that we do. And this is the Treasurer's Report as of January 25th. Pete may talk a little bit about 1 or 2 additions that are in there.
This is Pete, W7PR. And first of all, I'd like to thank the folks that ran for offices tonight, especially Max and Dan, for stepping up as president and vice president. So
And thank, what's his name for the,
oh, and also Mike, of course, W7VO. Mike, that was
Yeah.
great. You did a wonderful presentation, very, very interesting. And thanks for all your hard work. It's obvious that you're really, you know, putting the ARRL and the membership first. And thank you.
and Neil for being the nomination committee.
Yes. And Neil for helping with nominations and the election tonight. So first of all, I just want to make sure that I'm being heard. Are you hearing me, Max?
Yep, yours sound good.
Okay, Max, are you hearing me?
Yeah, you sound good.
Okay, I had my audio muted locally here. I think my speaker audio. Okay. So I don't know if I can control the scroll down.
No, I can help that. Do you want to scroll all the way down? So this is most of it. There is a couple of lines here at the bottom.
So the budget, you have the budget.
That, let me check.
That was the piece we were missing.
Yeah.
I have to apologize, folks. I got so wrapped up in trying to make sure that the election was going to work out tonight that I forgot about the budget be approved tonight. I don't have it with me. So Max is looking through some of the emails. It was sent out to the board members and so forth. We've been working on it for a couple months now. And so we'll see.
Yeah, I'm still looking for it. Oh, there we go. Give me just a second. I have to save it.
And I should thank John for his little discussion or his report on the icing conditions up here at Mount Scott. We're fortunate to have equipment at the facility, the repeaters and so forth. And down in the basement, there's a significantly large diesel genset. And it, of course, it picked up the load and kept our equipment online, along with the internals to the site up here, the heat and so forth. So John gets into a tight spot when the weather turns like this, and it's not easy. I know one time I came up with my wife and we shoveled the walkway so that, you know, he and his wife could get into the building. They had come up to try to get the transmitter back on the air during a snowstorm. So it's not easy being a broadcast engineer. Now oh, there we go.
There you go.
Here we go. All right. Yes, okay. So what we're looking at is our projected expenses based on past years plus additional expenses for this year. And, you know, I could go down the line and read them all, but I'm not sure that's really necessary. Since, you know, you can all see what they are. Some of our costs that are actually low are for repeater sites. We do pay insurance every year for liability. And we budgeted in line item 2, we've budgeted in equipment insurance. And we're going to start adding that in so we've got coverage. That's through the ARRL. We have some maintenance budgeted in there, money for maintenance. It's minimal. If we get into a problem like this ice storm, if we'd had troubles up the antenna systems, and it may be there's some things we don't know about, but some of that would help to at least begin to cover some of those costs. On the packet maintenance and improvements, there is an additional 2 line items on there that Wayne wants to add, and Wayne has been spearheading the WinLink and the APRS equipment up here, the operation, with help from other people. There's other people helping Wayne. But he wants to include the ability to accommodate 9600 baud for the VARA, the VERA FM, which there's some indication that the local ARRS, the county ARRS is beginning to want to go in that direction. So everything we have here is 1200 baud right now. So the budget add-on for that for a data radio is $355 and $100 for a sound card modem to go with that. So that's another, let's say, $450. So that would be added to the bottom line there, the draft total. That would bring it up to something on the order of just rounding it off, be 500 onto that. Let's see, it'll be 32, it's about 3,200. If my math is right, something like that, $3,200, $3,300, our budget for 2021 would carry us through this year. So we've got some money budgeted for field day because we did operate in the field last year out at Max's, and the plan is to do the same again. So does anyone have any questions about the budget? And I'm I guess I would entertain a motion if someone feels this is worthy of being accepted this year.
Question?
Yes.
This is Donna, Alpha Golf 7, Mike Oscar. And you have a line item there, swap meet sales expenses 2 at $40 with, but the extended amount is 0. as well as the Mount Scott lease. Repeater site lease expense, Mount Scott is also 0. Are
Yes.
those intentionally 0?
Yes. We're
Okay.
not able to do anything with swap meets this past year and a part of it. And of course, going into this year, we don't know how soon. So it's possible in the fall, we may be able to go to a swap meet, but right now we just didn't budget any money in there. It costs about $40 for expenses and so forth for somebody to go to a swap meet and set up a table because they have to pay for the table and so forth. And then we're very fortunate here at Mount Scott that we currently don't have any fee. So it is 0. Does that?
This is Mark Allen. I got a question for you. This is your expense budget. Do you have an income budget?
Well, it's primarily dues, and we have some income from the sale of things like on eBay and so forth. But I don't have something I can present to you tonight.
Thank you.
So did you need a motion to approve?
Yes.
I move to approve the budget as submitted.
Do we have a second?
I second.
So
May I ask you a few questions? I mean, I'm a newbie. I'm just trying to understand what you presented, sir. Is it okay if or can I talk to you later about it?
well, later is okay. If you have
Okay.
a quick question, we could answer it maybe.
Yeah, my question was like, I mean, since you planned all of this budget, did you kept anything for sundry for the because like for the like when we plan for a home budget, we tend to have something on sundry based on like to meet the issues that might pop up later because of some or the other things. So does planning this budget, I mean, do you see any do you foresee any events that might require some use of expenses, and you might want to include that into miscellaneous or sundry issues? I mean, that's just a thought.
Yes, I understand your question. I think on some of these items, we've included some extra.
Okay.
You're correct that we don't have anything cranked in there for out of the ordinary expenses. And I think our feeling is that we would have to deal with those as they come anyway. So at this point, we haven't done that, but it's a good question. Thank you.
No problem,
Yeah, I
sir.
think if I'm not mistaken, Pete, was it a couple of years ago that we had some antenna replacement or repair that required a special vote?
Well, last year we spent quite a bit of money on new antennas and significant amount of money because some of it to get the new antennas on the tower required hiring climbers. So we had a large expense last year. This year we've tried to trim it down to kind of the bare minimum.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? I'll turn it to you to take the vote, Max.
So I think we had Donna as a primary. I'm forgetting the name, and I seconded it. Because we're on Zoom, anybody opposed to passing this? Okay, very good. I believe it's passed for 2021 budget. And thank you very much, Pete, for talking through this.
Sure, thank you. Thank you all. Good night.
All right, and the last couple of slides that I have, for a future park presentation, these are kind of some of the ideas that we're looking at. The GQRP Club, Buddy Poll, logging is one of the things that I personally would like to know a lot more about. I've done logging on field day. I'm not good at all at N1MM, which is a popular free software.
Max,
Yeah, go ahead.
I happen to have a presentation on N1MM software that I presented at CPAC a couple of years ago. I'd be glad to do that for your club sometime.
That would be awesome. I will be in contact with you very, very soon.
Glad to help.
Yeah, we actually had quite a few members that had that very question and really would like a presentation. So thank you, Mike. Emergency powers for such as batteries, generators, and solar, which has come up top of my mind after living through 7 days with no power. Satellite and ISS, repeaters, and slow scan TV, ham radio clubs in other countries. If you do have or would like to do a presentation, be a park guest speaker, you can, or even just suggest a future park topic that you would like to see covered, you just go ahead and email me, max@nultra.com.